All right, welcome. It's about 10 or 11 minutes to 7. And yes, if you can see, I have a full newsroom.
Full house.
Full of gentlemen.
A full house. Yeah, that's very big gender imbalance.
But at least there's one lady at least to, to show that, we've, at least we've tried. We've tried. Allow me to welcome this morning Professor Levi Mponja from the Media Council. Karibu sana Prof. Ndugu Martin Mutua from the Standard, David Ohito from the Standard, and our regular George Kadara.
Patrick Gadara.
Media critic. Excellence.
That is new.
Gentlemen, welcome. Karibuni sana. And let's just get straight into it because we have an hour to just discuss issues. And the big issue that this week that we're going to discuss, and I think has been put out there, is Monday Saba Saba rally coverage or not. Let me start with you, Prof. What is just your on basic view, just beginning of what happened on Monday in terms of how we covered or did not cover Saba Saba rally?
I think you first of all look at the distribution of the media, electronic, print, radio, television, and the question is how was the event covered in each of those platforms. But then we go back and also look at the lead up to the coverage. And then beyond the lead up to the coverage also, how did the media houses decide to frame the stories in the lead up to those events? And I think an analysis of how it was covered probably needs to take into account all those factors. And it seems to me that in looking up to the lead up, let's start with the print media, for instance, that in almost every one of the media houses, you almost sense as if there is a decided position of how to frame the stories. And you see that in kind of the pictures that were used and where the pictures were positioned. You look at the kind of sides, when you talk about an objective and balanced reporting, you look at in the lead up, in the build up to the event, what side was each of the media houses highlighting. And you can see that very clearly in every one of our media houses. I'm glad Patrick is here. You also have to look at cartoons and how are the cartoons building up the event. So all that leads up to a very clear image that you almost sense was the agenda that...
Do you feel that we built it up into this big thing that we don't know what it was going to be? We played a role,
I don't think the media houses pretended that they didn't know what it was going to be. I think you almost get the sense that it was decided it was going to be violent. So there's all the violent narrative that's coming through, what's going to happen. Look at the analysis, for example, that was carried in the Star about the storm pestrels, for example, a feature article that seemed to build up, this is what we expect is going to happen on that day.
On that Monday.
Yeah, so much so that when you see in your story that has just run, somebody saying it was an anticlimax, it's because the media, I think, had built it up that the climax is going to be violence, for example. And so when the violence didn't occur, then it was anticlimax, or the interpretation that one can be.
All right, Prof. Hammond, I thought, let me pick Martin. This is big story over the Saba Saba, let's keep peace, let's not forget, we are together, we are one, and all these things. We built it up, with editorials all through, of how we are one and whatnot. What was Saba Saba really all about?
It was just a political rally. Remember what I said last week. The problem is we don't keep this kind of catalog when we're discussing. We tend to forget. I said last week that there will be a political rally, it will come, and it will go. Why do we have to build hype and tension in the country? And I said it very clearly that on this particular aspect, the government had failed us in terms of trying to create a situation which was not there. Because this is just any other rally. The CORD has been having rallies in other parts of the country, and we've been covering them, and there had been no issues. Why were we trying to create a situation that the country is going to break down on Saba Saba? It was just a political rally. It's going to be held at Uhuru Park. There should have been just the security that they were providing, and period. And you see, that's exactly what happened. Why were we trying to make things what they were not supposed to be? Because, like I said, the opposition has its role to play. If that is the way they've chosen to play that role, and they get the coverage that's supposed to get, so be it. So we don't have to pretend that we are going to script for them and tell them what to do or what not to do. So in terms of coverage, I would speak for print. I know we did our best. We've been covering those rallies, and we presented the same situation yesterday.
Right.
And I wish my good friend Joe Ageo was here. He could have told me. But I wouldn't go there right now. But I'll not shy away from discussing that.
He's away on leave. We actually made an attempt to get him, but he's away.
All right.
I hope it's not deliberate, Joe.
Right. I'll just find out from David. Knowing that you deal with online content and a lot of that, both print and online, and actually TV as well, there was a lot of updates that were coming in from media houses using their social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and maybe a bit of YouTube. And, you know, there were so many retweets and all that. Don't you think that just about the same impact was created as would have been, say, if these rallies were broadcast on national television?
The same would not happen, because if you profile the audiences in the country, those with access to internet are very few compared to those who have access to TV stations and radios. So there are more numbers the other side. And then why would you want to force audiences to go online while they have TV sets? You can bring it on board. However, I must say that I was in the election for the Kenya Editors Guild, and the biggest discussion after that election was, why did TV stations switch off Code Rally after having covered them 100% before? And there was an agreement, Chatham House rules, which I choose to break here, that the editors either agreed or conspired to give the Saba Saba rally a wide berth, for fear that it would incite people to violence, but informed by the reason that we have a poorly cultured political class whose words you cannot censor live. My argument is that, how did they censor them in previous rallies, and they failed to do so on Monday? And Linus Kaikai, away in Burundi, Bujumbura, I think, said that there was a consensus between the editors who ran these TV stations that they would go silent. And I think they were also informed by a very scared government, for no apparent reason, that there would be violence that would break out. I remember having attended a meeting earlier in the week, which was attended by high military officers, the secretaries, cabinet secretaries, who were very concerned about this rally. And you may not blame the editors fully. I think the government painted a picture of a scared Kenya and a scared country.
There were a lot of questions about the neutrality, of the media houses. Were they neutral enough? Did they bring out the message enough? Because what we saw online were minute-by-minute updates of what was happening at the rallies. But then all over the broadcasts seemed like it was a different story.
Well, it was just soap operas that they were playing, and it's interesting. Apart from David, when Martin is saying, why did we do this? This is the press asking itself why it did something. That's the first thing. The second, I think there was a build-up to it, as Levi said, and there was a narrative that was propagated. I tend to think that it was a deliberate one, and this is not the first time. We saw this during the elections. Essentially an event is built up. It becomes so scary, this big thing that nobody wants to touch, and then suddenly you say we can't cover it. So when things went wrong at the IEBC, suddenly, nobody's talking about it, and we ask why. Then this happens again. I think you can see a pattern here. This was just a rally, as Martin says. In any democracy, it's a mundane thing for the opposition to have a political rally. But the government starts building it up as something that's going to rock the country. Remember after Mpeketoni, when they started saying, these are going to be violent rallies, and stuff. And then the media picks up on that narrative, doesn't question it, just propagates it, and keeps pushing it, and then gets to a point like this and they say no. So you have to ask, why are they fear-mongering? Why is the government fear-mongering? You know? And the same thing with CORD. Why do they fear-monger? And both of these guys have an interest in Kenyans not having the opportunity to sit down and interrogate issues. You know, to ask, you want national dialogue, what is it about? You know, to ask questions, you want a referendum, this is it. You know, if government was saying before that they had planned to have talks and then think, what happened to that? They don't want us to ask these questions. So they push us to a point where we are too afraid to ask them, where we think the very act of asking questions is what will spark violence. You know.
All right. Okay, Prof, let me just bring it and we ask it, you know, correctly and in perspective. Was it an act of cowardice for us not to cover the rally? Was it an act of bravery, you know, for us not to cover the rally?
I think you need to interrogate what David just said about the meetings they held. And in the light of that, then raise the question of the independence of the media houses, the independence of the editors. I mean, when, and David is as senior as they go, talks about these meetings that they attended, it begins to raise very
certain
interesting questions. And I think probably the editors will be in a very good position to tell us whether it was an act of cowardice, etc., etc. But I think we also must recognize that I think media operates in a specific context and too often is influenced by those other dynamics. And again, too often the more media outlets we have does not necessarily lead to diversity of content, but actually much more similarity in terms of the kind of content that they carry. So I don't think that would really surprise us that they behave as a herd, I mean, moving towards the same direction in the same way that we're seeing it.
Martin, we've seen this though, just to bring it, just in the run-up to the election, again, there was these famous editors' meetings, you know, that talked about how, you know, to manage the elections and the situation, you know, and in effect, we traded two things, integrity of the ballot or to keep peace. Are these two things really interchangeable? We could actually interrogate the integrity of the ballot, honestly, without bias, you know, and actually have an election that is peaceful.
Well, okay, whereas I think we cannot audit ourselves, the audit should come from our listeners and our viewers and Kenyans at large. I think to some extent also we stand accused in terms of how the media is the direction we are taking. The moment you start accepting government to come in and take charge of your proceedings, as media, trust me, you are in trouble. The moment you start going to bed with government as a media, believe you me, you are taking a very dangerous path. And it's only, I don't know where you're going to get to stop, because you're creating a precedent. Because now the media, as David said, the editors either conspired or something happened and they held some meetings with government functionaries. Then what's the way forward? You've not offered this kind of media coverage. Then what happens in future in terms of how is that you've already set a precedent and a trend is here coming by in terms of you will have other meetings. Government will also have meetings. Will you also block them out in the same manner? So you're playing here with a very dangerous situation, because if you are independent media, you must take that route without any direction from anybody or any persuasion from anywhere. If you're independent media, that decision ought to be taken without any persuasion from any other quarter. So for me, I think the media must recollect itself and chart its way forward, because we have already started taking a very dangerous path, and it will catch up with us.
But what does that say about the Kenyan media?
Let me clarify a few things here. One, the media and the editors meet news sources every day. We meet those in government, we meet those in parliament, we meet those in churches, we cover church rallies and Muslims in mosques and so on. So it should not be a blanket blame on the editors. Two, this issue of coverage of Saba Saba rally is now a subject of debate in the Senate. And Nyong'o has so many questions to answer this morning. And I saw him make erroneous mistakes yesterday, several errors that the meeting purportedly between editors and government officers included persons he named on the floor of the House who did not attend that meeting. I wish he would get his facts right so that we just don't condemn individuals to have attended meetings which they were absent from. And I think going forward, you cannot wholly blame editors for the decisions they made. When we beamed cameras on the 207 violence, everybody after that blamed the media. So we also coming from a history. How far do we go? The country was very tense on Monday. If we turned in and zoomed in on what Al Jazeera did, for example, slight skirmishes, and where police officers were enforcing law and tear-gassing people who were rowdy, and being that would trigger possibly other riots across the country. So we also have a responsibility. It's a very tricky road to navigate. However, I do not agree with my colleagues that we could choose to switch off the rally 100%. Perhaps we should start looking at investing in technology where we can delay these hate speech mongers, and many of them are in the rank of file of both government and the opposition.
If I may say something, I think the press has become pretty much a victim of its past, because they have not invested in explaining and contextualizing what politicians say. They have not invested in articulating the context within which our politics is carried out. Our press is supposed to be what sets the agenda for the country, but they have abdicated that. For the longest time, they've left politicians to say what they want to say, to pick their issues, to make their issues almost identical, or to convince us that their issues are ours. And because we haven't gone about explaining it, a statement, on TV is seen as inciting. You say, if you showed guys being tear-gassed on Harambe Avenue, that would spark riot somewhere else. Why is this that we have this perception? In '97, I mean, in the '90s, when we had the original Saba Saba and stuff, you used to watch it on TV. KTN would show it on TV. This is what happened. And they would take great personal risk because the authorities weren't particularly happy at you showing it. But now we've gone to a point where the country is more fragile. I don't think so. I think it's a perception that is created. That's why I keep coming back to this. People are being scared. There is fear-mongering going on. And the press is not interrogating that narrative of fear, of being afraid, of telling guys, just keep quiet so we can keep the peace.
But what does it say about Kenyan media, or about us as media houses, when Al Jazeera broadcasts live, say for instance the Saba Saba rally, for quite some time? It was close to 15 to 30 minutes. And what we're doing here is actually watching Al Jazeera and getting the updates from Al Jazeera. What does that say about us as media houses?
I would say,
I think it says a lot. I think it says a lot. I think, and this is one thing that people are pointing out during, on Monday, that you want to watch it, you go to Al Jazeera. The same thing that happened, I think, even during Westgate. A lot of people will be switching on to international channels to get the analysis, the question, not just the government propaganda being regurgitated. And this is the thing, is until our media actually starts asking proper questions.
Patrick, just to interrupt you a bit.
Is this what we would call media gagging?
There's a certificate that someone has sent for us online. I don't know if, David, you feel like
Yeah, it's this.
I think for me the media is just a reflection of the Kenyan society. One, you have to look at the editors don't own any media house. That is one thing. Neither does the Kenya Editors Guild own any media house. So the channels that exist are owned by other people. However, there's a very strong clarification that media owners did not influence the decisions that were made by their editors on Monday. That is what came out in our discussion.
It was made by editors?
It was made by editors.
Out of some journalistic, that is what we want to find out. What was the journalistic?
Yes. That the editor has the right to choose on what to go on air and what not to go on air, and that is a global rule which you will not change by one rally on Monday, and that they made the best choice for the country.
You think it was the best choice?
They made the best choice in there.
Prof, let's bring it. We need your expertise as we try to move this conversation forward, because the media is only just supposed to cover events, but we shape events. We are supposed to actually, while the government is fear-mongering and the opposition is hate-mongering, we're supposed to actually, bring this to context, in effect, and talk to the public and explain this what's happening in government, this what's happening in position. Have we abdicated that duty from where you sit?
I think the Kenyan media probably is a hostage. I think Patrick said, or was it Patrick or David, a hostage of its past in some sense. And I think that have let that really become such a huge, this thing around their neck. But also when we look at the threats that we have to the press freedom, I think one of the major ones is self-censorship, the extent to which the editors sit down and decide this we can touch, this we cannot touch, right inside within the newsrooms where they would go, and trying to feel this sense of this is the direction that the nation is going, without interrogating what are the kind of forces that sometimes make decisions for the editors, so that the editors are led like a sheep to the slaughter, so to speak, and just move on. And I think when we listen to David providing the defense of why they did the things that they did, you kind of sense that they've been herded into this position, and as a consequence of that, they've been following up this position that has been put forward to them. I think it really speaks of us when we say we are all turning to Al Jazeera to. These are Kenyan journalists saying we are turning to Al Jazeera to find out
what's happening.
I also think if you recall what used to happen in the 80s and 90s, when people used to turn to BBC radio, to hear the real news, because KBC would essentially be a mouthpiece for government. This is a situation that is very similar, because essentially the Kenyan media is doing the government's bidding. If we make no bones about it, that is what is happening. And so people are looking for what is credible. And what's credible is what's out there. So when you want to know actually what happened in Westgate, you don't go read The Nation. You don't go read The Standard, you go read the New York Times, you go look for Al Jazeera, and things. And that's what's happening. And this is the Kenyan media essentially hollowing itself out. They're paying a price for not investing in actually having, protecting their independence, standing up to government, which essentially the main role of the press is to be primarily as a critic of government. But
all right.
For as much as they're not doing that, people are going to find other sources.
So now that we know what's going on at the end of it all, and Comrade Moirongo from Voice saying it all boils down to who we are, to who the owners of the media are. But then now, when it comes to our boldness, authoritativeness, and just speaking out as the media and performing the duty of informing the society, how bold and how trustworthy are we at the moment towards Kenyans? Because knowing that the sentiments of Kenyans now seem to be a little bit falling on either sides, how bold would we say we are in delivering information to the society?
Bold, I look at it two ways. Kenya is a very fragile society divided in the middle. If you say anti-cod things, you're very bold for Jubilee. If you say anti-cod things, you're very bold for, cod. So it's very difficult to really cut the middle ground. But however, that does not bar the journalist from addressing critical issues of this country. If you look at Saba Saba, what's happening in Lamu, Tana, Hindi, northern Kenya, Mandera, Marsabit, there are three critical issues which we are running away from. One is poverty. Are we addressing those issues? Two, inequalities that have dogged this country since independence. And three, unemployment. If the government tried to address those issues, I don't think there would even be a need for Saba Saba. But these issues have confronted us from time to time, and every attempt to solve them has only created more unemployment scenarios and more people falling into the bracket of the poor and raising the inequalities. The number of Kenyans who cannot afford is becoming very high. So when you start seeing arguments being bandied by the government that we will now move to digital platforms and advertise there because the media appears not to be friendly, then you start getting worried. Two, we are in businesses as media. The day we stop making those profits, private media like ours, like KTN here, will just simply close shop and go home. Government still remains the biggest supplier. In print, biggest advertiser. In TV, competing favorably with the big timers like Safaricom and so on. So there is some part or some chip of the apple the media must give away. But this should not be done at the expense of the telling the true story which we owe to the public and the audiences we serve.
Martin.
No, I was just going to say something. I think the moment the media begins to see itself as part of the civil society, I mean, fighting poverty, I mean, correcting issues in society, then in a sense the media is abdicating its responsibility, because we look at the media as an avenue for providing information and must remain in that space of servicing society in this format. But I mean, when you look at the things that the government ought to be doing, and the media begins to see itself, for example, part of the role of fighting for peace as being part of the role of the media, which then means when we begin to audit the media, if there's no peace, then we also see failure on the part of the media. But I think it's not, because our task in the media houses should be to report objectively, be faithful to both sides of the stories, look at the various angles of that story, and in the business of providing information, the business of educating the public, this is the business of the media. But in terms of the question of mobilizing resources to alleviate poverty, etc., that's why we have government and we have other agencies that focus on that.
That's not our job.
That's not the task of the media, in my view.
I really, I'm very comfortable with that. I think you've got to look at the media not just as sort of this neutral playing field that where all these well-matched teams come to play on. The media does shape narratives. It does shape understanding. It's not. It's not neutral at all. It pushes an agenda. The question is, whose agenda is it pushing? Or what agenda is it pushing? And I think very much the media should be standing in the space of where it's pushing the Kenyans' agenda. There's what the opposition wants. There's what the government wants. These are just players. What's in Kenya's interest? I mean, let me give an example. Look at insecurity. There's what government will say is the cause, but that's just what government says. When our media doesn't go beyond what it's being told to ask the questions, why is it that our policemen, after 50 years of independence, are so poorly equipped? These are not problems aside yesterday. Why is it that the KDF took over my report about 2 years ago, 3 years ago? How come charcoal exports out of there have doubled according to the UN? How come Al-Shabaab is actually making more money now? Unless our media starts asking these questions, not regurgitating what they tell you, because what they tell you is what is good for them. Yeah, not just dealing with press releases and publishing them as if they're news.
And I don't think there's any problem with that. But the only challenge I see is where the media takes the task of how would I put it? See, for example, the role of civil society in terms of providing some specific services to communities, etc., etc.
Okay, I mean, I would agree. They're not into what providing services, going to drill boreholes or anything like that. But primarily, I think they are a check. They are part of a system of checks and balances that we have against power. And primarily, they've got to stand up for the people against the arbitrary exercise of power.
Gentlemen, we need to take a very short break because we need to come back and discuss that, and also discuss the media today versus the media in the 1990s, and the future of the media. Finishing with this statement from Calvin Sam, says the president became editor-in-chief of media forces. Taking a short break. We'll be right back.
Today's program lineup. Dettol soap's non-stop protection formula has the power of Dettol, which gives non-stop protection from germs for 24 hours.
All day and all night.
Mother's weapon for non-stop protection. Dettol. Be 100% sure.
Can you know that we love this game? Yeah, we'll never come, we feel no shame. This ain't about no money or fame, but we know no pain, no game. Walking to move by uniform. Beba Vuvuzela, India form. Trend the study, tunataka. Tunataka funga bao. Tunataka funga bao.
To get this song and the best dancehall songs, bonyeza *699 *50#. Remember to bonyeza *699 *50#.
Next on Hapakule News.
Get all your data, SMS, and call needs in one convenient pack that you can use across networks.
Hii wiki on Hapakule News.
Neymar kabla itwe Neymar alikuwa anaitwa Nehemia na walikuwa wametoka Kidogoli.
Walai.
Huko ndiye unajuaje hizo story? Si huko ndiye amezaliwa.
Ngoja kwanza, kwani mnataka kumaanisha hawa ndio wameunda hii kampuni ya Neema?
Hauna joint?
Tumeaje hiyo wapate na
Nakula. Kwani wewe ndio uliza geto walikuwa wanaimbia hiyo wimbo? Hauna kitu?
Malipopote huko jo, husuku na husuko, pasale na hasapa. Takeona, itakuwa ndiala na design ya fwine.
Choose a Tosha pack from 10, 20, 30, 50, and 100 shillings. Dial *767# to get started. Airtel.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express here on KTN, and we're talking about the blackout, the Monday blackout, which is the bigger deal here. But there are a number of questions and tweets that are coming through. At Waweru is asking if CORD had paid to have this rally broadcast on national television, would the editors have sold the airtime to them? And then secondly, someone is saying the media sold its soul to the devil. If you remember that, I think it has something to do with that tea that all the editors had at the famous tea. Exactly. So maybe it has something to do with that.
I attended the famous tea, so I can talk about it. There's absolutely nothing wrong in having discussion with people in government. You remember that at that time when we went to State House, the Jubilee government had just come into being, and they were actually unveiling their press team from State House, and that's when even Manoa was introduced and stuff like that. So I did not see, we weren't told in terms of which way to report or not to report. Actually, even that event, we covered it live, and we showed Kenyans what was happening.
I asked the President Uhuru the hardest questions, I think, in his career as president.
The issues were discussed and we were there. So I don't think there was anything wrong with that. But moving forward, in terms, I mean, this idea of that you cannot talk, if somebody is in government, you cannot talk to them, must be, we must get out
to be quite honest, I don't think it's about talking or not talking.
No, I'm still, they asked that question, so I had to make that in discussion. We had that discussion. But after that, I don't think after that the media started, the coverage changed. I do not believe that. I think this particular, we are looking at this particular coverage that happened the other day in terms of the meetings that preceded that rally. So I think that is what we need to be interrogating. I doubt that the coverage in the media is informed by us having gone to State House and had discussion and had tea.
Yeah, but that's the point. It's not just the tea. Remember Ashikuku's famous phrase about going to State House for ugali. It's not about just that one meeting. I think it's more about a collaborative approach where media essentially acts almost as if it's a part of the government's information machinery, you know. And this goes back. I mean, you mentioned just after the elections. I mean, look at the coverage. I think it was atrocious. When he was announcing his cabinet, you know, and guys, there was an operation going on in Garissa. Nobody asked him about that. Not a single person. You know, the media had like, what, an hour with the president. You told ask questions. Nothing. You know. And you have to ask yourself why. People are being arrested. They're arrested.
I think guys. Your prism is not really the true picture of what really happens. The media has asked some of the hardest questions. And let me inform you for free that some of us have been summoned to State House, again, for stories we've written criticizing the very government, including the palatial retreat in Mount Kenya Hotel. So, to assume that we have gone to bed with government and we have been writing only friendly stories is very untrue.
We're giving you an example. Look at today's Standard. Yeah. We have asked questions on what is happening in Tana.
And why these guys
this is not guided by government. We have put the hard questions to them.
All right. And again, if we want to go down that route, I mean, we can. And here's the thing. How media frames this questions, the things that they're saying that are you asking, for me seems very much to ignore the let's say the uncomfortable reality that that underlies the fact that this happened. The government clearly tried to incite people following Peketoni, clearly did it. You know, they're trying to step back away from it. Nobody calls them out on it. You know.
Nadara, if you recall we can't allow you to make a statement which is not factual.
What is not factual?
When Peketoni happened, we asked questions. We were with you here. You remember? We even talked about the president's statements, how it was misplaced. We said that, and we even asked, and I showed you even before then, we had even put in the Standard the kind of questions in terms of what happened. We questioned.
I don't think
we did.
We're talking about
standard gauge railway. I mean,
and those seem to be issues aside from politics, because what we're seeing here is security questions, questioning the security of the country at the moment, the state of security, and we've also seen questions about, you know, the standard gauge railway. That in itself is where exactly is Kenya's money going, and are we really making the right investments? But when it comes to posing political questions, are we as bold as you know, all these 6 questions that we're seeing on the Standards front?
Let's ask a neutral.
Part of us.
I think much as we, let me just step back, and I'm really very proud of the Kenyan media, let me state that.
Thank you.
Because I think this is one of the most professional media that you have in the region, and you would travel the length of this continent and come back and say we're really proud of the products that we are having, whether it's print, electronic, I mean, everywhere. I mean, we're really doing very well in that sense. And I like the question that you're posing. I think sometimes when we are able to move away from the politics, I think Kenyans were so emotional with respect to politics, and the newsroom is not exempt. And so when it comes to reporting and discussing these things in the newsroom, the political issues, it seems like to a certain extent, journalists step back from professionalism and now start reporting from the heart, so to speak, and the mind goes on leave. But I just wish that we would extend the mind to cover politics as well, so that we're able to analyze and probably even move away from politics. Look at the last 1 week in all this media. I mean, taking the print media into account. The Standard led with the rally for the last, if you from yesterday, I mean, yesterday's headline going back to about 5 or 6 days, it was all about the Saba Saba rally. I think the nation was nearly the same. You look at the people, was a little sporadic here and there, the star again here and there. One would want to think, what would happen if our media houses would be able to step back from politics and be able to focus on other items? I mean, for example, talking about the standard gauge and interrogate, I mean, that, and I'm not saying that the questions have not been asked about that as thoroughly as they should, but let's focus on what can we do in terms of nation construction, and it's a little bit step from the politics, because then again our professionalism in the industry will probably come out much stronger than it does come when we go back to the base, so if I would call it, reporters that we tend to engage in. But having said all this, I think just the question of now where the head and the heart meet, and if we could be able to focus on this.
Professor, I really don't think it's about the head and the heart. I've been in the newsroom for 19 uninterrupted years. I have seen headlines. We have tried those ones of development. You will flop and close shop and simply go home. Let nobody cheat you. If there was any editor who did not choose a Saba Saba headline in the week running up to Monday, I think
it is true.
Yes,
it is
true.
True.
Simply go home. So these stories of trying to say we can navigate development stories, if our politicians are saying petty things on the streets and rallies, I mean, it's all
but I mean,
a waste of time.
Here is the thing again, and I find it it's a very disempowering narrative. Our media acts like it has no power. You know, we've got to say what the politicians want because that's the only thing Kenyans will buy. But Kenyans are conditioned to buying that. You know, that's what that's a diet they have been fed. It is a diet that is driven by the politics, by the politicians. That's why I keep saying that the media essentially abdicates its role of setting
in effect,
an agenda.
In effect, what you're saying, and when we say this, there's no enough political will, so there's no enough media will to cover other stories with the same fervent and the same push and energy. You know, and a good example, David, 7 years ago, investigative stories on TV were not really anything, you know, until Moha and Namo showed up, and they're big things right now. They're big stories. Can we do that in anything else and give it the same perspective, the same context?
But Smart, if the media is also does not live in isolation. We live in this same atmosphere that we are in, like everybody else. You do not want us to cover a standard gauge railway when 30 people are dying in Wajir, another 50 are dying in Lamu. We ignore that and start covering development issues of standard gauge railway and stuff like that. That cannot happen.
And opening terminals and airports.
Absolutely.
It is the question then, why are people dying? And if you're going to cover why guys are being killed in Peketoni and why our police can't respond, then you've got to go beyond, you know, what I think is very superficial analysis to deeper questions about the systemic problems that we have.
Which we have done
the police
today.
Actually, well, I didn't read that. But
Read the standard.
If you've done it today,
a big full stop on the standard today.
If you've done it
a big
today,
question mark, right?
When have we done it before? And here's the interesting thing, you know, insecurity has been with us for a long time, and we were discussing it the other time when I was here, you know, and the narrative about insecurity, you know, the same thing, the narrative about corruption, and most of the coverage that we get is very episodic. It's, you know, let's report on Peketoni and that's done. Let's report on Tana River, then that's done. You know, let's report on Westgate, then that's done. You know, it's never what are the lines that join up to all of this. All these things are telling us something about how our security forces are set up, how our country is set up, you know, and some of the systemic problems that exist there. And unless we are willing to go in and dig and expose them, you know, that then I would say would be the media actually serving the country. But this sort of surface thing,
I don't think so.
I feel that I am cheated.
Gentlemen, I need to take another short break. When I welcome back, we're in the newsroom discussing that hot topic, that is the media blackout or not, you know, covering the Saba Saba rally. Gentlemen, about 10 or so minutes to finish this up. Let me start with you. From the events, in totality, in context, is the Kenyan media today, in your honest view, A watchdog or a lapdog?
Oh no, I think the media is still a watchdog. Our media is still raising very critical questions. I think what we're saying here is we're just expecting them to raise more questions than probably they are. But I think it's not a lapdog as such. It's
not yet.
It's more of a watchdog.
Is the dog being domesticated?
Not at the moment. We must run away from that cage and ensure that we are very far. I think the media has done well so far. I think we can't use just one event to be able to give us score sheets in terms of how the media has performed. Believe you me, I would agree with Levy. I've also traveled around the region, and if you come back to the country, you realize the Kenyan media is way far ahead. The threshold we've set in this part of the world will not be achieved by many media houses around this region for a very long time. So I believe we are doing well, but moving forward, like I said from the beginning, we must be wary of trying to go to bed with government, because if we dare do that, we will be finished. And we will be finished flat before even we attempt to do anything. Neither can we also attempt to go to bed with the opposition. We have to be the middle ground in terms of the society is looking up to the media to be able to offer both sides of the divide in terms of what Kenyans must know. Mm-hmm. So when we have rhetoric from either side, we should be the ones playing the referees. So I think the media has a role to play, and moving forward, whether it's the editors, whether it's the media owners, they must be able to chart a way forward in terms of how they want to see the media in the next generation.
All right, same question, David?
For me, it's both a watchdog and a lapdog. To the extent that if you criticize so much, you are the watchdog. You tell the truth, you are the watchdog. But when you have to kneel down and listen to state and beg for adverts from them, listen to summonses from State House, then we are good as lapdogs. We are not doing the good job. But we have a perfect opportunity to take this country to the next level and to showcase that the media is still the conscience of this nation. Should we all bow down to the administration, I think we will sink this nation to very bad levels.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, from where you sit?
Oh, from where I sit, it's obvious. I mean, I think the media has pretty much behaved atrociously over the last few years. I think it has. No, seriously. I'm not just saying that. I think it has very much, and it's funny you asked that question because I wrote a post about it sometime last year. Asking that very question, is this the media lapdog or watchdog? And I was looking at the Masjid Musa raid, and the narratives that were coming out of there, And it's interesting when government goes into a place and brands it and says, this is a jihadi meeting we are having here. Mm-hmm. Goes in, picks up guys, kills a few people and stuff. And the only narrative we are hearing is what they are telling us. Not all these other many people who seem to have been there, who seem not to be aware that there was this raid. When government comes out with a pair of scissors and a pair of pliers, a policeman shows this to press, and they label it, these are weapons. Who says they are weapons? A pair of pliers, a pair of scissors, these are things you probably would find if you went into a church. So who decided they were weapons? Whose narratives is the media pushing? This is a question I keep coming back to. And you see, predominantly, they keep pushing the official narratives. They keep pushing the viewpoint of government upon us, so that this rally by code is something to be afraid of, because government says it is something to be afraid of. Not that in itself it constitutes anything. The other time there was this, the UN released its report on the use of wildlife and forestry or illegal products from wildlife and forestry to fund terror and stuff. It's interesting how little of that was covered. And the linkages between terrorism that we are suffering, and for example, the export of charcoal and where this charcoal comes from, how it comes through, you know, and the fact that we control the ports, you know, up in Somalia. And I'm wondering why. Why is it that these questions aren't asked? When you've got the elephant leagues saying, well, the poaching crisis is funding Al-Shabaab, and the UN says actually it's not, where is the media standing in the breach of actually finding out? You know, you did a fantastic expose with Dennis Onsarigo about butchers and poachers, and then it was allowed to disappear. He says in his thing, 11 people who the government knows, who the government protects, are in charge of the poaching. It's there. You guys have reported it. And then you keep quiet about it. You allow it to disappear.
But they have reported it.
Yeah,
what would you rather have us do after we report it? After the investigation part?
Go and take those guys.
Should we go and arrest them?
No, it's not our duty. What I would expect from the press is that constantly, these are things that you're putting out. These are the things that are important, that you're telling Kenyans, look, you know, we didn't just do it once and we forgot about it. You know, this is what's important for you. You want to sort out insecurity, look at this. And consistently, you keep saying that. Okay. That's how you push a narrative that is people-friendly.
We have to take this home, and you know, and I need to get your final comments. Kadara, 30 seconds long you've been speaking, so I need to go. You must make it 30 seconds.
Well, final comment is simple. I think the press needs to grow some balls, needs to essentially define the people's agenda and start in the place where the people are, and not be influenced by narratives either from opposition or by government.
Right, David.
We're doing a good job, but we're under threat from the state. So many bad laws still hanging around our necks. We must defend freedom and independence of the media and that of the editors.
So the media freedom, from your perspective, is under threat today?
Very much under threat. Never has been as worse as it has been. The worst Ministry of Information we've ever had since independence.
Okay.
So the threats are alive. And with these laws, they target to muzzle the space we have enjoyed and to control the content that goes to the people.
Martin, your thoughts?
Well, that's very strong coming from Ohito. I think he has some information which we don't have. But I think it seems. Yes. But if that is the case, then there's cause for worry. Because the Kenyan media has always been very vibrant and alive in terms of how we cover events. But if what Ohito is saying is anything to go by, then there is a need to rethink in terms of how we relate, in terms of how we offer our coverage both to the government, opposition, in terms of our space in vis-a-vis public interest. So that is something that the media needs to take audit and deal with it.
Martin, do you feel, just a question, do you feel that today, from where you sit, you have, you know, the public is with you more as maybe 5-10 years ago? Do you feel that? Or do you feel the public has moved a bit? Or we moved?
No, I don't think the public has moved away from us. We have actually been moving, we have moved the public to another level. So in my belief, so far, we have been able to deal with issues that are in public interest, and the public itself has been able to respond favorably to us. So it's something that, well, we are in a dynamic world. Things are changing. So if situations are changing, as media will need to step back and be able to take audit and see how to move forward. So these are challenges that the media is facing, and I think we can be able to surmount them. It has happened before, and we've been able to get them through. So there is nothing that we cannot move forward even in this time and age.
Isn't it beautiful that we're having this debate? and really interrogating how the media has conducted itself over the last while. And I think that's, for me, is very encouraging, because what it seems is that there's soul searching, and out of this soul searching, there'll be questions of how can we do better going forward. And let me associate myself with what he's saying about probably David's observation, fairly strong. Because when you look back in our history, we've had in the past instances where journalists have been jailed, journalists have been harassed in very strong ways, and I don't think that we're in that space today. I think let's not lose sight of the constitutional provisions that we have today, which we didn't have 5-10 years ago, which one can fall back on and claim some space. So there's movement, and look at the dynamism in the industry. When I was growing up, we had one station, then we had two. Now listen, I mean, you're saying when the Kenyan media gave us the blackout on Monday in terms of live broadcast, you went to Al Jazeera. Well, we used to go to BBC, but the fact that now there's BBC, there's Al Jazeera, and all this that we can access to. So the space has really increased, and I think we just need to keep on keeping on. Just one more thing here. The space, the freedom space, is always contested. I mean, there's always, it's not just the government, civil society, organized groups that are always clawing back on this space. And the industry must constantly lay claim to what they have. And I think that's what we're doing. And what I think we've got here is fairly healthy dynamics of claiming the space.
There is a lot of state interference.
That's to be expected. And the media has to take its own claim and say, this is our space and you not move beyond
Look at it. They want to cut the budget for the media by 3 billion shillings, 2.5 billion. Where do you expect Martin and I to go?
Oh, but I say that the state's role is to finance the media.
But we also finance it. We give, the media last year gave the government 12 billion shillings in taxes. They want to cut 3 billion shillings?
But I think we're mixing things here. We live in this society. Media as individuals, corporate individuals, benefit from the services that the state provides, and therefore paying taxes is our responsibility, it's our duty. I think it's not a, it's not a favor that we're doing the government. We are just doing what we are supposed to do.
Finances that have made Kenya's media robust, it means there is a motive to reduce that space, to guzzle the media.
If a commercial enterprise, let's call it whatever company X, Y, Z, was to cut their budget down, would you be writing editorials to blame that commercial interest for cutting the
I think the story about cutting budgets is a whole discussion for a whole other
I think we can make a commitment. We can make a commitment that next week we can have the same panel and take the discussion on about budgetary allocations and how media operates and whatnot.
Yeah,
is that right?
And invite my good friend Matiang'i to come.
And before we actually close, South Sudan is marking 3 years today. Gentlemen, you have been the eyes of what's happening in South Sudan. I don't know what you make out of it. We're just about to speak to Ambassador James P. Morgan and also Rebecca Garang. She does hold a huge position in South Sudan. So what do you make out of South Sudan at 3? Prof.
To wish South Sudan the very best in moving forward direction, and I think really there's a lot of soul searching. The peace and stability in South Sudan is beneficial to the entire region, and we would just want to see that there's a sufficient reflection that we move forward well, and I would wish South Sudan very fruitful and happy birthday today.
Right.
Well, it's a young nation that was coming up very well. I've followed stuff in terms of how Sudan has evolved, South Sudan, and the tribulations and the trials they've undergone, even when Garang was their leader. And I got very disappointed when they started sliding back with this Salva Kiir and Riek Machar war. It didn't augur very well. I hope they'll find a solution in terms of how they can move forward, because that country belongs to all the Sudanese. Whether it's Riek Machar team or the Salva Kiir team, all these are people who are brought together by John Garang, and they must live the dream of John Garang if that country is to move forward, and they should discard their selfish interest both ways. That's the only way to move forward South Sudan.
Right. David?
If South Sudan could just practice the politics of inclusivity, fair distribution of resources, and fight corruption, that would be Africa's #1 country.
Right. Patrick?
Well, I think South Sudan is a case in point and a warning example of the dangers of simplistic narratives, or the idea, as was portrayed then, that all you had was North versus South, and if the North left the South alone, all would be in peace. There is a real need in South Sudan, just as in here, for people to interrogate the reasons why this fighting is going on. What are the underlying problems, what are the historical issues there, and to bring them to the surface, to surface them so that they are dealt with, as opposed to just having it's simply bad Machar versus bad Salva Kiir. but to actually try and articulate what are the problems and what are the real issues that underlie this, and then you can actually resolve it.
Right. South Sudan at 3, and that's what we're going to be talking about shortly. And, well, KTN's Ben Katili is in Juba, hoping we can get a chance to speak to him, but we'll try as much as possible to get to him and see how the celebrations are going on in Juba. Do stay with us.